The station lights flickered for the third time in an hour, and Lance Merrick sighed so hard it fogged up his visor. He poked at the console like a man playing whack-a-mole with fate, muttering threats to the wiring he knew wouldn't listen. Another alert blinked on his screen, a repair request tagged Priority 4, which in space station terms meant low enough to ignore, but annoying enough to eventually ruin your week. The location made him squint. Bay 94. Jay, that docking ring hadn't seen a live pilot in 3 years. Last time anyone went near it, they came back with 6 types of rust and a stowaway rodent that started a spice smuggling ring in the ventilation system. Still, protocol was protocol, and his supervisor, a coffee-drunk AI named Derek, was already paging him with monotone menace. "You have received a maintenance assignment, Lance. Declining this task will result in disciplinary karaoke," Derek intoned from the ceiling speaker. "Fine, fine," Lance groaned, slapping the accept key with the drama of a Shakespearean lead. "If I die, tell my plants they can have my room." He grabbed his toolkit, which consisted of 1 overpriced plasma spanner, a roll of sealant tape, and 3 suspicious-looking screws he swore he hadn't put there. Then he began the long walk down the empty corridor to 94J, whistling to keep the ghosts of neglected tech bays from getting ideas. The air changed as soon as he crossed the threshold. Cooler, still. The motion sensors didn't even bother to activate. One flickering overhead lamp cast a lonely cone of light on a ship he'd never seen before. Sleek, jet black, humming so softly it was almost seductive. It looked like someone had welded a dagger to a whisper. Lance approached cautiously, raising his scanner. No response from the ship's ID beacon. The hull shimmered with an alloy he didn't recognize, though it bore the scars of recent battle. Plasma scoring near the thrusters, a ragged gash along the side panel. He reached for the manual override. The panel popped open with a soft hiss, revealing a tangled mess of conduits, coolant tubing, and something that might have been organic. Lance blinked. "Well," he muttered, digging into his toolkit, "you're either a ship or a very quiet pet. Let's see which one bleeds coolant." He got to work, whistling off-key, occasionally cursing the previous mechanic who clearly had either tentacles or a death wish. The power couplings had been routed through what looked like a crystalline matrix, and there was no backup battery. Only a strange, pulsing orb nestled in the heart of the circuit. "Either you're running on forbidden tech," he said aloud, "or someone wired your ship like a lasagna." A shadow moved across the ramp. Lance glanced up and froze. She stepped out of the ship with the grace of someone used to being obeyed, dressed in a long, iridescent cloak that shimmered like the night sky seen through tears. Her eyes locked onto his, brilliant gold, piercing, unblinking, and her ears, long, elegant, unmistakably non-human. "Hey," he said, because his brain short-circuited under pressure. "Nice ship. Definitely not cursed." She tilted her head. "Are you the technician?" "I prefer the term miracle worker, but yeah, Lance Merrick. You called in the maintenance, right?" She hesitated. "Yes, the ship was damaged. I require it operational again. Immediately." Her voice had that calm urgency that usually meant someone somewhere was either dying or plotting to. Lance nodded slowly. "No pressure," he said, tightening a bolt that hissed angrily at him. "Just trying to keep this thing from melting through the floor. What happened, if you don't mind me asking?" "Space lice? Rogue space bears?" "A targeted strike," she replied. "My pursuers damaged the propulsion systems. I require discretion." "Right," he said, trying not to look too closely at the still glowing scorch marks. "Well, you got it. Total discretion. Lance Merrick. Friend to shady clients everywhere." She didn't smile. Not exactly, but something softened in her expression. She stepped closer, peering over his shoulder. Her presence was oddly electric, like standing near a static storm. "You're quite skilled," she said. "Oh, flattery," he grinned. "That'll get you a half-off coupon for my next repair." She studied him for a moment, as if deciding whether he was worth the truth. Then she spoke softly. "I am not who I appear to be. This ship, it is not just a vehicle. It is my sanctuary." "Cool," he replied, tightening another panel. So royalty, secret agent, or runaway pop star? She blinked. I beg your pardon? Just narrowing it down, he said. People don't usually talk about sanctuaries unless they've got big titles or big enemies. The woman hesitated again. You ask too many questions. And you answer too few, he shot back, smiling. We'll make a great sitcom. Silence fell for a moment. Then the ship gave a soft chime, and the main systems flickered to life. There, Lance said, dusting off his hands. Repaired your grav dampeners, reinforced the primary intake, and recalibrated your navigation so it doesn't spin you into a black hole. Excellent, she said, moving toward the cockpit. I appreciate your service. No problem, he replied, already turning to leave. Just another day in the glamorous life of Lance Merrick, savior of ships, champion of duct tape. He was halfway down the corridor when he paused, frowning. He'd seen a blinking light on her dash, an old signal, buried deep in the navigation logs. One of the kind that meant a beacon had been triggered, a tracking beacon. Lance's gut turned cold. He tapped his comm. Derek, run a scan on outgoing signals from Bay 94J, will you? Scan complete, Derek replied. Signal detected. Long-range tracking ping. Highly encrypted. Also, Lance, your lunch is getting cold. Thanks, Derek, Lance muttered. Add accidentally helping fugitives to my resume. He turned back, eyes narrowing. Whatever kind of royalty she wasn't running from just anyone. And he just put her ship back on the grid. The first explosion shook the station hard enough to knock over Lance's half-eaten sandwich, which he took personally. That was my lunch, he grumbled, clutching the wall as alarms howled through the corridors like a choir of hungover banshees. Unscheduled arrival in docking quadrant 94J, Derek's voice intoned with a bit more smugness than usual. Probability of hostile intent, 92%. Probability you will regret skipping your lunch break, 100%. Lance sprinted back toward the docking bay, toolkit clanking at his hip, heart pounding with a mix of adrenaline and something disturbingly close to excitement. This was not the first time things had gone sideways on this rust bucket of a station, but it was definitely the first time it involved a mysterious woman with diplomatic posture and ears that belonged in a fantasy hollow. He rounded the last corridor, nearly colliding with her. Kalara, he still wasn't sure if that was her real name, or just something elegant she used to keep people guessing, stood calm in the chaos, as if explosions were just a minor inconvenience. We need to leave, she said, eyes scanning the smoke curling under the emergency doors. Oh, now you want to leave? Lance said, dodging a fire suppression drone as it zipped by, spraying foam in all the wrong directions. Because when I said this place was a death trap, you said, and I quote, it will do. Kalara didn't answer. She grabbed his wrist and yanked him toward the hangar. Her grip was surprisingly strong, also slightly electrifying, but that might have just been the static from the faulty light fixtures. They found me, she said. Who found you? Space debt collectors? A galactic HOA? Be specific. Before she could respond, the ceiling erupted in a plume of sparks, and 3 sleek figures in obsidian armor dropped down like malevolent acrobats. One of them pointed a weapon that looked like a clarinet, but hummed with enough energy to atomize furniture. Kalara didn't hesitate. She lifted her hand, and the lights around them pulsed. The ship behind her whirred to life, ramp dropping open with a hiss like an angry serpent. Inside. Now, she ordered. Lance bolted, dragging his tool case because he had emotional attachments. The moment they were inside, Kalara slapped her palm to the control panel, and the ship roared forward before the ramp had even sealed shut. Lance stumbled into a seat that looked custom-made for someone more regal and less clumsy. So, he said as the ship rocketed out of the hangar and into open space. On a scale of 1-2, they're going to turn us into decorative ash. How bad is this? Kalara was already flipping switches and typing commands in a script that looked like someone had taught Vines to write. They are part of the Obsidian Guard, she said, loyal to my uncle. If they found me, the encryption matrix failed, which means I fixed something too well, Lance muttered. I hate when that happens. An alert chimed. 2 ships on their tail, angular and fast, with weapons hot. Oh, look, Lance said, peering over her shoulder. We have fans. Kalara didn't smile, but she didn't scowl either. That was progress. I require your assistance, she said. Well, you're in luck. My resume includes fixing alien royalty ships and making excellent coffee. She gestured to the console beside her. Activate the aft disruptor field, then reroute power to the tertiary thrusters. Lance stared at the console. Yeah, okay. 2 questions. 1. Which button lies to me the least? 2. What's a tertiary thruster? She raised an eyebrow. You repaired this ship. I repaired the hull and the diagnostic system. You didn't mention the flight controls were in riddles. Nevertheless, he threw switches until the ship jerked, engines whining as power surged into parts of the system that had previously been napping. A flicker on the monitor showed the pursuers briefly losing lock. Yes, he shouted. In your face, overly dramatic space ninjas. A blast rocked the hull, throwing him into Kaelara's side. She caught him instinctively, and for a moment, they were just 2 people jammed together in a spaceship dodging plasma fire and bad decisions. Do you have a plan? He asked. Yes. Good. I'm improvising. Less good. Kalara spun the ship around a cluster of asteroids with the grace of a dancer. Behind them, the enemy ships closed the distance. We need a hiding place, she said. There's a junk field not far from here, Lance said, full of old mining rigs and busted satellites. Basically a scrapyard for the romantically doomed. She adjusted course. The stars blurred as they made the jump, and within moments they dropped out into a graveyard of forgotten tech. The ship powered down, sinking into the field like a predator hiding in coral. Inside, Lance finally let himself breathe. So, he said, rubbing his face, want to tell me why your uncle's goons are trying to decorate space with your remains? Kalara hesitated. I am, or was, the Queen of Viridian. I fled after a failed attempt on my life. Oh, Lance said. Cool, cool. I fixed a Queen's spaceship. That explains the upholstery. She glanced at him. You're taking this rather well. Well, your enemies are trying to kill me too, so I figure this is a bonding experience. She didn't answer, but she didn't push him out the airlock either. Lance leaned back. So what now? Kaelara studied the stars. Now we vanish, and you, Technician Merrick, are officially involved. Does it come with dental? A flicker of a smile touched her lips. Outside, the stars swirled silently. Lance woke to the hum of the ship's auxiliary systems, purring like a satisfied cat. His head had been nestled against a console that definitely wasn't built for ergonomic napping, and he was fairly certain he drooled into a port labeled Neural Uplink, which frankly raised questions he was too afraid to ask. Kaelara stood in the cockpit, one hand on the console and the other clasping a steaming mug of something blue and suspiciously frothy. Morning, Technician, she said without turning. That depends entirely on whether we're still being hunted by lethal space ballet dancers, he groaned, stretching until something cracked. They've left the junk field. For now. Great. You know, this might be the best vacation I've ever had. 5 stars, very immersive. Would recommend to fellow technicians who enjoy space assassins and mystery beverages. She held out a second mug. Try it. Lance sniffed it. Is it going to grow legs and ask for equal rights? It is Kelvirian root extract, stimulates clarity, reflexes, and may briefly cause your tongue to glow. Well, that's a sales pitch if I've ever heard one. He took a sip, winced, and muttered, tastes like regret and battery acid. That means it's working. Kaelara returned to the controls, eyes scanning a translucent display filled with glyphs that shifted when he tried to look directly at them. I need to access the echo relay on Vren Station, she said. The location of my allies is encoded there. Vren Station, Lance repeated. That's the one shaped like a corkscrew with budget issues, right? The place where I once saw a man trade a kidney for a fried sandwich? Yes, it is sufficiently unregulated. Perfect. I always wanted to return to the site of my worst food poisoning. The ship creaked gently as it disengaged its camouflage and drifted out of the junk field. Stars brightened, glittering around them like cosmic paparazzi. So, Lance said, settling into the co-pilot seat, do I call you Your Majesty now, or do we just pretend you're a suspiciously elegant mechanic in disguise? Queen in exile, she said flatly. Titles are optional. He grinned. I'm calling you Sparkles. She raised an eyebrow. Why? Because you sparkle under pressure. Her only response was a sharp upward tilt of her chin, but he swore he saw the ghost of a smile again. The ship jumped, space folding around them, like a dream snapping shut. The sensation made Lance's stomach do a somersault, then write a formal complaint. They emerged near Vren's station, a metal monstrosity orbiting a dim star, like a half-dismantled paperclip. Shuttles buzzed in and out of its many ports, most of them violating at least 6 safety regulations. Kalara guided them in with practiced ease, slipping between freighters and mining barges as if she'd done it 100 times. "Do we have a cover story?" Lance asked. "Or are we just going in bold and mysterious?" "You are a mechanic with unusual clearance. I am your cargo specialist." "Cargo specialist," he echoed. "Right. Mysterious. Possibly telepathic. Definitely royalty-adjacent cargo specialist. We must avoid attracting attention. Sparkles, I hate to break it to you, but you look like the protagonist of a forbidden romance holo. You're going to attract attention by breathing." She glanced at him, amused and annoyed all at once. "Then try not to say anything that gets us shot." Vren Station's interior was even worse than Lance remembered. Neon advertisements flickered beside exposed wiring, and vendors shouted over each other trying to sell wares that might have once been food or weapons or both. The air smelled like burnt oil and stale ambition. "Ah, home, sweet home," Lance muttered. "Watch your pockets, and possibly your kidneys." Kalara walked with unshakable purpose, drawing more stares than she probably realized. Lance followed close, trying to look like someone important, which mostly involved walking fast and frowning at imaginary clipboards. They reached a narrow corridor tucked behind a noodle stand. Kalara pressed her palm to a panel, whispering a word that echoed in Lance's ears like a bell underwater. The wall shimmered, revealing a door that didn't exist a moment ago. "You know," Lance said, "I used to think doors were just doors. Now I expect every wall I pass to betray me." Inside was a small chamber, filled with blinking tech, and a smell that suggested someone had once attempted to cook an octopus using only hope and spite. Kalara moved quickly, pulling a translucent crystal from beneath her sleeve and sliding it into a recessed slot. Lights flared. Data streamed across a floating display. "Coordinates to my loyalist enclave," she said. "They survived. Barely." Lance leaned over her shoulder. "Looks like they're holed up near the Nebulon Rift. That's a pirate zone." "Exactly. It's the one place my uncle's reach does not extend easily." A crackle sounded from the doorway behind them. Then a voice. "Didn't expect to find you here, Your Grace." Lance turned. The figure was human, or close enough, dressed in faded armor, with a face full of scars and a smirk that said he enjoyed collecting them. "Friend of yours?" Lance whispered. "Captain Threx," Kalara said coolly. "Formerly of my royal guard, now a bounty hound." "Ah," Lance muttered. "So not a friend. Got it." Threx raised his weapon lazily. "Big bounty on your pretty head, and an even bigger one if you're brought in breathing. But hey," he winked at Lance, "I'm flexible." Kalara moved faster than Lance thought possible, flinging a disc that exploded in a burst of light. Lance yelped, tripped over a wire, and accidentally knocked over a console that promptly began sparking. They ran, back into the market, dodging startled vendors and confused tourists. Threx shouted behind them, followed by a plasma bolt that vaporized a churro stand. "I didn't even get to eat," Lance wailed as Kalara pulled him through a maintenance hatch. "You'll live." "That's what you say now, but I've seen what happens to men who skip churros." The hatch slammed shut behind them. Darkness and silence. Then Kalara turned to him, breathing hard, eyes fierce. "We need to leave. Now." "Agreed," Lance panted. "Also, I vote we add avoid Vren Station forever to our future plans." "Noted." And just like that, they vanished into the bowels of the station, chased by betrayal and bound together by the galaxy's worst travel itinerary. "Okay," Lance muttered. "I admit I didn't think the sandwich debt would come back to bite me this hard." Kalara drew a small cube from her belt and flung it at the nearest vent. It exploded into a magnetic pulse that fried the drone's circuits and turned its descent into a clanging dance of mechanical failure. I think I love you, Lance whispered. Kalara looked at him coolly. Wait until we survive. They sprinted through the access corridor to the wormhole chamber, where Skibbo was slapping the conduit with a wrench and singing, Hold together, baby. Daddy needs a miracle. You're up, Skibbo yelled. I primed the coil with citrus and emotional instability. That sounds unnecessarily specific, Lance said as he leapt onto the platform. Kalara joined him, her hand brushing his arm. The conduit began to glow. Ready? She asked. To be molecular soup? Always. The chamber exploded in light. Reality bent sideways and sound twisted into color. As they vanished into the tear in space-time, Lance thought he heard Skibbo yell, Tell the rift I said hi, and that it still owes me a sofa. Then nothing but the quiet hum of the universe unfolding itself around them. They tumbled out of the wormhole like laundry from a broken dryer, landing in a heap on the metallic floor of a derelict observation deck overlooking the Nebulan Rift. Lance groaned, his internal organs seemingly rearranged into alphabetical order. Kylara stood first, of course, brushing herself off with that maddening grace of hers while stars wheeled overhead like silent, burning witnesses. Well, Lance muttered, clutching his side, that was a smooth landing. If by smooth you mean traumatizing at the cellular level, Kellar offered him a hand. Better than being dead. Debatable. Their new location was ancient. A pre-collapse observation station, long abandoned, now suspended in silent orbit around the rift. The air smelled like dust and machine oil dreams, and every corridor echoed like it remembered a war. Kalara activated her scanning beacon, and a faint blip appeared on the holographic map. Signal trace confirmed. The Loyalist envoy is here. They've been hiding in the subdeck's quantum folds. Quantum folds? That's a real thing? I always thought that was just a term shampoo companies used. Kalara shot him a quick smile before leading the way, boots echoing on cracked Durasteel. The air grew thinner the deeper they went, lights flickering as if trying to warn them in Morse code. At the bottom of the stairwell, a glowing panel pulsed in response to Kalara's hand. A hiss, a click, and a chamber opened. 6 figures stood inside. Armor scuffed, expressions tight. One stepped forward, a tall woman with copper braids and a scar that ran the length of her jaw. She bowed low. My queen. Not anymore, Kalara replied. Not unless we end this. The envoy provided them with new data. Her uncle's fleet was minutes away. He'd tracked their jump signature and was preparing to broadcast false footage of Kalara's supposed death, claiming control over the throne by default. The people would mourn her, never suspect the truth. Classic space coup, Lance muttered. All the drama, none of the flair. They had one shot, override the broadcast system in the station's relay core, and stream Kalara live to the galaxy. If they could prove she lived and expose the conspiracy, the throne would be hers again. If not, well, at least they'd go down with dramatic flair. The relay core was at the top of the station, naturally, because of course the critical system was nowhere convenient. They sprinted through corridors as proximity alarms blared. Her uncle's fleet had arrived. Remind me again why we don't just hide and let someone else deal with this, Lance asked between breaths. Because that's what people without courage do. And we're not those people? Kalara just smiled and handed him a data spike. I need you to plug this in. I'll draw the fire. Wait, what? No, I'm the sidekick. You're the exiled queen with a face like sunrise and the spine of a neutron star. I do the running. You do the inspiring. She placed a hand on his chest. You've done more than run. You've stayed. Lance blinked. That's unfairly moving. They resurfaced in a ventilation shaft that could barely fit a single adult human, let alone 2 fugitives with deeply incompatible definitions of personal space. Lance pressed himself flat against the metal wall, which smelled vaguely like expired curry and despair, while Kylara shimmied ahead, her expression composed in that infuriating royal way she had. This is undignified, she muttered. You know what's even more undignified? Getting shot while debating spatial etiquette. Keep crawling, Sparkles. They emerged into a decommissioned supply dock lit by flickering strips of half-functional lumen tape. Rows of crates were stacked haphazardly, some marked hydro-ration units, others, do not open under any circumstance. Naturally, Lance made a mental note to open those later. Kalara activated a small projection unit embedded in her gauntlet, revealing a star map with an urgent pulse centered near the Nebulan Rift. We jump from the station's smuggling ring. It bypasses the main customs corridor. Risky, but faster. Great, Lance said. Nothing says comfort like trusting your life to black market gate tech run by a guy named Skibbo. Kalara frowned. Skibbo? He's, how do I put this gently, the kind of man who bathes in engine degreaser and thinks that's charisma. They slipped through the dock and into the maintenance sublevels of Wren Station, where even the security bots feared to hover. Flickering monitors played glitchy ads for synthetic romance experiences and sentient mattress subscriptions. A robot with 3 arms and 1 wheel skittered past them, muttering, "All hail the glorious return of the Sauce King," which Lance chose not to investigate. At the bottom of a rust-streaked lift shaft, a door blinked with an interface too old to be compatible with modern systems. Kalara bent down, pulled a thin cable from her wrist device, and jacked in with a satisfying click. "Bet you say that to all the obsolete hardware," Lance joked. "It appreciates my finesse," she replied, typing commands with alarming speed. The door hissed open, revealing a chamber bathed in soft purple light in the scent of heated citrus. "Well, this is disturbingly pleasant," Lance murmured. "That's the illusion," Kalara said. "Prepare yourself." A round creature with 4 eyes, no visible limbs, and an aggressively floral vest bounced toward them. "Skibbo lives," it announced, voice pitched somewhere between enthusiastic karaoke and a dying harmonica. "Skibbo," Lance said, bracing. "You look squishier than I remember." "I've been exfoliating. Who's your shiny friend?" Skibbo's eyes turned toward Kalara, and for a moment the room went very quiet. "I am a merchant of delicate goods," she said carefully. "And I," Lance added, "am her extremely underpaid assistant." Skibbo squinted at them, which meant all 4 of his eyes narrowed until he resembled a mildly suspicious raisin. "You smell like secrets and imminent disaster. I like that. Follow me." They entered a side corridor that pulsed with unstable gravitational fluctuations. Lance nearly tripped over a floating mug labeled "Property of Someone Who Punches," and Kalara walked with the confident poise of someone genetically incapable of stumbling. "Why do your shortcuts always feel like dreams I regret having?" Lance whispered. "It is the safest route," Kalara replied. "That's deeply troubling." Skibbo led them to a spherical chamber with a cracked warp conduit embedded in the ceiling and wires running in what Lance generously described as directions. "She's a prototype wormhole pucker," Skibbo announced proudly. "Unstable, untested, and banned in 33 systems." "Can it get us to the rift alive?" Kalara asked. "Define alive." She handed over a credit sheet with enough value to make Skibbo shudder in delight. "You've got an hour before the local security grid resets and scans this area. I'll prep the conduit." As Skibbo shuffled off singing something about gravy, Lance turned to Kalara. "Look, I've been rolling with this chaos for a while now, but are you sure this is the only way? My uncle will anticipate more traditional jumps. We must be unpredictable." "Right, because nothing says unpredictable like trusting our atoms to a machine Skibbo built out of stubbornness and kitchen parts." A sudden noise cut through the chamber, high-pitched, rhythmic, and growing louder. Kalara's eyes narrowed. "Patrol drones." "Already? How'd they find us?" "Lance Kessler," a robotic voice intoned over the speakers. "You are harboring a high-value fugitive and have exceeded your sandwich debt at 6 local establishments. Surrender." Then she was gone, sprinting across the exposed corridor as auto turrets unfolded from the ceiling and began spitting plasma. He ran the opposite direction, diving into the relay control room, jamming the spike into the console. Sparks flew, the lights dimmed, and for a moment he thought it had failed. Then Kylara's face appeared on the galactic stream. She stood in the center of the corridor, calm and regal despite the chaos around her. Her voice carried across the stars, steady and clear. She told the truth of her uncle's betrayal, of the assassination attempt, of the loyalists who had risked everything. And then she did the unthinkable. "I no longer seek the throne," she said. "I seek a new kind of leadership, one not inherited but earned." Gasps echoed in the chamber. Lance's jaw dropped. "You're abdicating? We just did all that running for an epilogue twist?" The stream ended. Outside, the enemy ships paused. Then one by one, they began to power down. Loyalist ships emerged from stealth fields surrounding the station. Kalara's uncle, exposed and politically vaporized, fled in disgrace. The coup crumbled in real time, like bad cake under too much frosting. Later, as they sat on a balcony overlooking the stars, Kalara nudged him with her boot. "You look disappointed." "I just thought I was going to be romantically entangled with a queen," he said. "Now I have to recalibrate all my bragging rights." "I'm still royalty," she replied. "I just prefer not to rule by bloodline." "So, you're like a freelance monarch?" "A monarch on sabbatical." He tilted his head, grinning. "You ever consider fixing ships for a living? It's not glamorous, but the snacks are decent." "I might," she said, "especially if the company's good." They shared a quiet moment, starlight spilling across the floor like a soft benediction. Lance, who had once measured his day by whether the vending machine gave change, now found himself measuring time in Kalara's smiles and the weight of choices he never expected to make. "Hey," he said suddenly, "remember when I said it was just a routine ship malfunction?" Kalara laughed. "You mean the day that changed the galaxy?" "Yeah. Next time I see a blinking dashboard, I'm just going to walk away." "No, you won't." And he knew she was right.